terminology stuff. You already know all your terminology stuff anyway. So the developmental grooves, I'm using a maxillary tooth that tends to be frequently a difficult tooth for some people. So developmental grooves, I put them in the order of what I carve them or put them in the composite with. So I start with the buccal groove. I start with the distal lingual groove, and they're in black. I apologize if that's hard to see. I try to make them super thick. So buccal groove and lingual groove, and then of course the central groove will come afterwards. Okay? So buccal groove, lingual groove. And I do that, for me, I do that with every tooth. The first thing after the amalgam's in, I put the buccal grooves and I put the lingual grooves in. That's the first thing I do. Once the composite's in the occlusal, over the occlusal surface, I put all my grooves in. It's the first step I do every time, and it lays it out. All right, in your mandible, you have this the Y or the wine glass shape that I talked about in my other PowerPoint that you were reviewing. And so that's created by making this buccal groove, your distal buccal groove, your lingual groove, which will be it'll be in between those two buccal grooves. All right, so it'll look like this. Okay, and then of course you have the rest of your central groove that comes in later. Okay, so that Y is where it becomes really important. We don't want the buccal and the lingual grooves to line up. It's not that second mandibular molar. So that's really key first and foremost. In this particular tooth, we do not want those buccal grooves and lingual grooves to line up. It has to be a Y. Some supplemental grooves are more important than others. These are the ones that I feel are important in this maxillary tooth, and I'll show you why. So first of all, right here, this supplemental groove helps form the triangular fossa. Okay? These two supplemental grooves help form the mesial triangular fossa. And of course we have spillways that come over the marginal ridge. All right, and that's the lowest part of our marginal ridge, and that's where it needs to match the height of the marginal ridge next to the tooth adjacent to it. If your spillways match, the rest of your height will match in your marginal ridge. Okay? So we want the spillway to match. And then we have your oblique ridge, and we have your transverse ridge, and those are separated by this triad of supplemental grooves here. So on the buccal side, it's 2, and on the lingual side, it's the 1 on that gigantic mesiolingual cusp. And those will be important to form our central fossa. On the mandibular tooth, we still have the same thing on the mesial and distal side. We have the supplemental grooves that form our triangular fossas, one on each side. We have our spillways, and then we have the supplemental grooves in the center of the tooth that help define our triangular ridges. So, and especially these two right here on the Kilgore typodont are pretty prominent, and you can make really nice triangular ridges on the Kilgore typodont just by carving in these two supplemental grooves. So we'll show that to you. Okay. Supplemental grooves are optional, but I find that they make a really nice looking restoration, and they really define your anatomy. So I think that they are important. And then you have your second mandibular molar, again, your grooves that define your fossa, your mesial distal fossa, and then these two, especially once again on the lingual side in the Kilgore typodont, they're going to be quite fine, and they're quite defined. Right, these two supplemental grooves here. I'm trying not to make my laser pointer go too far around and make you go like, oh, dizzy. So, all right, so you can call it an X tooth, you can call it a double K tooth, whatever you want to call it. Okay, questions about grooves, supplemental grooves. Okay, because we're going to be drawing some of these things. Fossa, or fossae. So we have our buccal groove, our distal lingual groove, our central groove. Now here comes our supplemental grooves. We have our supplemental grooves here, on the mesial side, the distal side, and now we know exactly where to put our fossa, right there, right where all those grooves are. So it should hopefully happen naturally. It should be a natural thing if we put on our supplemental grooves. Triangular ridges, I don't really have much to say about them. There's five main triangular ridges on the mandibular first, but I also try to point out that marginal ridges are made up of triangular ridges. So sometimes I make that mistake and I tell you to carve your triangular ridge and I really mean your marginal ridge. Okay, because they are just marginal ridges that are on the border of the mesial and the distal borders of the tooth. Okay, so, and I do tend to treat them just like any other triangular ridge. I carve them very frequently the same way as I would carve some triangular ridge in the middle of the tooth, on the occlusal portion of the tooth. So, we'll get to that as well. All right. Hopefully everybody knows that you have what marginal ridges, oblique and transverse ridges are, so I'm not going to go into too many details about that, but this is how I indicate these types of ridges on our drawings. So on our drawings, I'm going to use these green chevrons to indicate height for our triangular ridges, and then I'm going to use these, what I call I-bars, to indicate longer ridges, unions of triangular ridges, okay? So it'll look something like this when I draw, okay? Okay, I'm not going to go into the occlusal table. Embrasure spaces, so these are going to be really important for your interproximal score. So interproximal is not just all about your contact, it's also about your embrasure spaces, okay? So you need to clear out your buccal and lingual embrasure spaces, have a nice contour to your tooth. Make sure we don't have any pregnant teeth that are really bulky in the interproximal or really flat teeth, okay? So occlusal embrasure spaces and gingival embrasure spaces, there's our occlusal right there between the teeth, and there's the gingival ones. And of course we don't want an overhang in the gingival embrasure space, right? But you also need to have some space above the contact area for your occlusal embrasure space. Your contact shouldn't be at the top of your marginal ridge. Okay. Contact should not be at the top of the marginal ridge. Okay. And then your contact should be slightly buccal on your tooth on an ideal dentition, which is your typodont. So it should be slightly buccal. And it does move down from very high up on the teeth here, more incisal, and comes down more cervical, so it's about the middle of the tooth, posterior. Okay, so thinking about where that needs to go when you're